We're here because free speech is under attack. We're here because people are being convinced that socialism works. We're here because people are being judged guilty until proven innocent. We are fighting back with facts. This is not a safe zone, so buckle up, Buttercup. This is the raw, naked truth.
Welcome to the Raw Naked Truth. I'm your host, Eric Lopkin. And with me for this Wallet Watch segment is Brian Williams of Northshire Consulting. Brian, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing just fine. I'm doing a little better than that inflation number. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Yeah, the inflation numbers were surprising. They were higher than expected, both the consumer price index and producer price index reported last week at almost record rates.
Yeah, some pretty high numbers. We had a 9.1 number on the CPI, and that came out on Wednesday. So most of that came from, as everybody knows, I mean, most of that came from gasoline, fuel oil. That's a big factor in the numbers, and that's what dragged up almost that attributed most of the increase came from that. So everything else was up except, believe it or not, fuel oil was down a little bit, but that's just the calculation method. But everything else was up across the board, and I think that number is bigger than most people expected.
It certainly was bigger. And of course, the administration has been making a big deal that, well, since the number was calculated, fuel prices have actually come down 40 cents a gallon. How much of an impact does that really have?
Well, it's one of those things, these numbers take a while to calculate and get the numbers in. So when the numbers are good, they say, wow, look how good the numbers they are. And when they're bad, they say it's yeah, buts, right?
Of course.
So you always get those. And, they're going to factor in the lag if things are moving quickly. But, these numbers to the average person don't mean a lot because they see it. They know it. You don't have to tell the average person who wouldn't know what CPI stands for that inflation is up. They live it. I did want to mention some good news. There are some things that are tied to CPI, which is the consumer price index that's important because try to look for some sort of positives here, but they're expecting one of the largest Social Security increases in history this year. We had a pretty significant one last year. So that's a little bit of help for seniors that obviously it'll all be eaten up with inflation, but you try to look for silver linings, and there's a lot of collective bargaining agreements where their salaries or incomes are tied to the CPI. So, certain, even, food stamps are tied to CPI. So obviously that number goes up, and then they, on the other side, they have to spend it. But, standard deduction is likely to have on your taxes when you file your taxes is going to be a pretty big jump this year. And even things like IRA contributions, maximums, and 401k contributions. So there's a lot that's really tied to that CPI number that a lot of people don't realize. And military benefits and federal civil service incomes are tied to that as well. So there are some people who will get some income. Probably won't offset the whole thing, but hopefully that'll provide a little bit of relief.
All right, those things, may cause some, minor relief to what's going on. Real wages have actually been going down because even though wages are going up, they're not going up as fast as inflation is.
Right.
But the problem with most of the benefits that you've mentioned is Social Security benefits going up, military benefits going up, food stamps going up. All of that is additional government spending, which we know is contributing to inflation. So
right.
It's sort of a wash. I mean, it helps some people, but it's a negative for the overall situation.
It is. And of course, it's got such a lag on it. I mean, it's nice to get a raise in January on the Social Security side, but seniors and others have to pay these bills now, July, August,
Right.
September, October.
Exactly.
It's
That's not going to help them over the next 6 months.
no, I mean, the best scenario for them would be that the ideal scenario and there would be you'd get inflation hot for another couple months. They calculate the raise for next year, and then inflation stops or even get a little bit of deflation or relief there, but that's not likely.
Yeah, now it looks like inflation is going to be here for quite a while. The Fed is expected to meet next week. Now,
Some were estimating they'd raise rates by a full percentage, 100 basis points, but now I think more the experts are leaning towards 75 basis points, but we'll see. I think it's more in the words than the actual numbers and what their thoughts are going forward.
yeah, even 75 basis points, though, is a very high raise.
It is.
They hadn't done the 75 prior to the last raise. They hadn't done 75 basis points in 30 years.
Mhm.
And I don't know if they've ever done two 75 basis point raises back to back.
Yeah, I mean, not that I can remember. If they did, it would have been early 80s, would have been the Volcker years when he was pretty aggressive there.
Yes.
But yeah, it's been pretty crazy on the inflation side. And one of the interesting things too, we get some pushback on is some of the inflation. You hear these terms like inflation protected, which I've always thought is a bad name for. You shouldn't have a category of mutual funds or ETFs protection anything. And a lot of those didn't perform in the first half of this year or over the last 12 months. And a lot of those inflation protected securities are designed to handle an expected slower growing inflationary environment. They're not meant to handle these sort of quick bursts of inflation, which a lot of times happen. So it takes some recalibration. A lot of them did well last year, calendar year 2021. But you see a lot of these inflation protected securities that are down year to date, and people are scratching their heads saying, well, why are these things down when they were supposed to be my inflation protection? But it's just another reminder that these inflation protected securities are not designed to match inflation dollar per dollar. And a lot of times they have some duration risk here, not to get too technical, but as bond prices, as rates go up, bond prices fall. So the rates that are going up, as we just talked about, is going to affect the bond prices. So the basket of bonds, the securities that they hold is going to drop. So it'll smooth out over a while, but people expecting those inflation protected securities to have a monster first half were a little bit disappointed on those.
Yeah, the economic situation has taken most people by surprise. And we were talking last week with Chris Calandra here, where we were saying, even if inflation goes down, at the time, this was before the CPI had come out, we were saying it was at 8.6%. Even if it dropped to, say, 7.5%, that's still a ridiculously high rate that's impacting the average consumer.
Yeah, they definitely are. The certain things like one of the things, we notice that sort of is away from the numbers is that a lot of these staples that people have to buy on a regular basis, those prices don't go up, 1% each month. And, you're getting a regular box of cereal that's $5. And then the next week you come in and it's $6.50. A lot of times they'll keep the price stable for a while, for as long as they can, so they don't have to tweak it too much. And then they do a big jump to account for what's already happened and what they anticipate to happen. So that's really where it hurts people the most, is they get used to a steady price on a particular item that's important to their family. And then you don't get a 1% monthly jump. You get a 50% jump, once a year. So that's the stuff that really hurts people.
Yeah, and those jumps have been occurring. I know I, for one, was horrified when the last time I went in to buy a gallon of milk. The prices have just been skyrocketing.
Yeah, all that stuff. I mean, eggs and cereal, and you just get those huge jumps after these companies and the grocers have tried to keep it steady for a while.
And a number of retailers have come out and said they've been trying to keep prices low. They've been trying to absorb the costs. But with the producer price index jumping as high as it did, they're no longer able to do that. So you're seeing more and more of those prices passed on to the consumer.
Yeah, and then of course in Connecticut, you've had minimum wage jumps there as well. So that certainly doesn't, when the cost of labor goes up that much, that's a significant increase that needs to get passed along.
Yeah, and those minimum wage jumps have been occurring all over the country.
Hmm.
So it was great to have you here, Brian. Thank you for being here.
Yep. Thanks for having me.
And that's the Raw Naked Truth. You can catch every episode of the Raw Naked Truth at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Amazon Music, Audible, and wherever you find podcasts. We'll see you next time.